Before we go any further into how my son and daughter-in-law tried to turn my retirement into someone else's birthday bash, I want to pause and speak directly to you. If you've ever been made to feel like your only value was in what you could give, your savings, your time, or your peace of mind, let me remind you, you are not here to be used up. Retirement is not the end of your story. It's the start of your chapter. You can still choose yourself, and you have every right to enjoy this season of life on your own terms. And to help you do just that, I want to share something special with you. 101 Fun Things to Do in Retirement for Women, a funny and inspiring guide to life after work. This book is packed with creative, uplifting ideas to help you enjoy your freedom, whether that means planning a garden, starting a hobby, or finally taking that trip you've dreamed of. It's lighthearted, it's inspiring, and it's designed just for women stepping into retirement with confidence. So before you watch what happens when I stop letting others spend my savings and start living for myself, grab your copy from the pinned comment. And if this message speaks to you, don't forget to hit like, share this with a friend who needs the reminder, and subscribe for more real stories of women standing strong. Because what comes next in my story is proof that your best years can still be ahead of you. My name is Ruby Patterson. I'm 67 years old. And after more than 40 years of working double shifts as a nurse, I thought I had finally reached the part of life where I could breathe. Retirement was supposed to be my moment, my one celebration. But instead, I found myself standing in the hallway outside my own kitchen, hearing my daughter-in-law's voice. Vera was on the phone, laughing, her words carrying clear as day. "Don't worry," she said. "Ruby's paying. It's her retirement, after all." I froze. Those 4 words, "Ruby's paying," cut right through me. Later that week, I learned the number, $63,000. That was the bill. Not for my retirement party, but for a giant joint event Vera and my son Brian had decided to throw, combining my retirement with Vera's mother's 70th birthday. Let me say that again, so you understand what I was facing. I saved for decades, every spare dollar carefully tucked away, and they were planning to use my name and my money to pay for a party that wasn't even mine. This wasn't just about money. It was about respect. It was about independence. After 40 years of giving everything I had, nights on my feet at the hospital, missed holidays, coming home so tired I could barely get my shoes off, I had earned the right to celebrate my retirement the way I wanted. That party was supposed to be a symbol, my final chapter as a working woman, closing with dignity and opening the next with freedom. But my son and his wife didn't see it that way. To them, it was a bank account with my name on it. To them, my savings were a tool to give Vera's mother a luxury birthday bash with all the trimmings. They figured since I was retiring, I could foot the bill. I still remember how my chest tightened when I realized what was happening. They didn't even ask. They didn't come to me with a plan or a request. They just assumed I'd agree. They wrote my name on contracts. They gave vendors my phone number. They treated my savings, the savings I had built penny by penny, as if it was theirs to spend. And in that moment, listening to Vera brag on the phone, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Anger. Real anger. Because this wasn't an accident. This wasn't confusion. This was a choice. They knew what they were doing, and they knew exactly whose dream they were stealing. When I close my eyes, I can still picture the little envelope I kept tucked in my dresser drawer for years. Written across the top in my handwriting, Alaskan Cruise Fund. Every time I pulled an extra overnight shift, I'd take $50 and slip it into that envelope. Eventually, I moved the money into savings, but the envelope stayed there as a reminder. My dream wasn't jewelry or cars. It was standing on the deck of a ship, watching glaciers slide past, knowing I had finally bought myself a moment of peace. That dream was worth more than numbers in a bank account, and now Vera and Brian were taking it from me without even blinking. The truth is, I'd overlooked plenty of things before. Small slights, little favors that turned into bigger favors. But this was $63,000. This was my freedom. And I wasn't about to let anyone, family or not, snatch it away without a fight. I didn't know how I was going to fix it yet. All I knew was that if I stayed quiet, if I let this happen, I would never forgive myself. This wasn't just a party. This was the beginning of the rest of my life. And if they thought I was going to hand it over with a smile, they were about to learn who Ruby Patterson really was. I should probably tell you a little about my life, so you understand why this cut me so deep. I worked as a nurse for more than 40 years. I started when I was 24, fresh out of school, and I didn't stop until the day I retired at 67. Hospitals don't run on 9 to 5 hours. My workdays were 12 hours if I was lucky, 16 if I wasn't. Nights, weekends, holidays, it didn't matter. When the phone rang, I went. I raised my son Brian by myself. His father left when Brian was still in grade school, and after that, it was just the two of us. I worked, I cooked, I paid the bills, and I tried to be both parents. There were plenty of times when I came home after a double shift and found Brian asleep at the kitchen table with his homework spread out in front of him. I'd cover him with a blanket, then sit there and pray I could hold everything together one more day. Money was always tight. Nurses don't get rich. Every dollar had a purpose: mortgage, groceries, keeping the lights on. But I made myself a promise early on. If I was going to spend my whole life caring for others, then one day when it was finally my turn, I'd give myself something back. That's where the Alaskan Cruise Fund came from. It started small. Whenever I pulled an extra overnight shift, I'd take $50 and tuck it into an envelope. On the front of that envelope, I wrote in big letters, Alaskan Cruise Fund. Some weeks I didn't have anything extra to put in, but whenever I could, I added a little more. It wasn't just about the money. It was about hope. That envelope was a reminder that there was something waiting for me on the other side of all those long nights. Eventually, I moved the money into savings, but I kept the envelope tucked in my dresser drawer. I'd open it once in a while and run my fingers across the words. It made me feel like I was still moving towards something of my own. For me, retirement wasn't about sitting in a rocking chair. It was about freedom. That cruise was supposed to be my farewell horn. The ship pulling away from the dock, glaciers sliding by, and me finally letting go of decades of stress. That was the dream I'd saved for. That was what kept me going when I worked through Christmas Eve or Easter Sunday. I gave up a lot along the way. I never bought fancy clothes. I drove the same old car until the wheels nearly fell off. I clipped coupons and stretched meals so the money would last. My friends went on vacations to Florida and Europe. I stayed home. Every time I said no to something, I told myself, this is for the cruise. This is for later. Now picture this. After all those years of sacrifice, after guarding that dream like it was gold, I find out my son and his wife have used my name to slap down a $63,000 tab for a party I never agreed to. Not just any party, one that wasn't even mine. My retirement celebration had been swallowed whole by Vera's mother's birthday. It felt like more than theft. It felt like erasure. They weren't just taking my money. They were taking the one moment I had saved for all my life, the one thing I had kept in my pocket to remind myself that everything I gave up would one day be worth it. I thought about all the nights I worked until my legs shook. I thought about the holidays Brian spent with a neighbor because I was at the hospital. I thought about the broken promises I made to myself. Next year I'll rest. Next year I'll travel. I had always put it off for later. And now that later was here, they wanted to strip it away from me. That's why this wasn't just about money. It was about dignity. It was about a mother finally getting something of her own. And in that moment, standing there with the weight of $63,000 hanging over me, I knew I had a choice. Either I let them take it, or I stood up for myself for the first time in a very long time. I gave up vacations, new clothes, and holidays with my boy just to save for that dream. If you've ever put your family first, let me know in the comments. Not long after overhearing Vera's phone call, I found out exactly what they had done. It started with a Facebook post. A friend from church called me and asked, "Ruby, why didn't you tell me you were throwing such a big celebration?" I had no idea what she was talking about. She told me to go look online. There it was in full color. Vera had posted a flyer with balloons and champagne glasses, calling it A Night to Remember, celebrating Ruby Patterson's retirement and Gloria Simmons' 70th birthday. Gloria is Vera's mother. The post bragged about a grand evening at the Wyndham Ballroom with live music, fine dining, and dancing. My picture was at the top, side by side with Gloria's, as if we were co-hosts, and underneath it all was the line that made my stomach drop, hosted by Ruby Patterson. I hadn't agreed to anything. No one had asked me if I even wanted a joint party, yet there it was for the whole town to see. People were already commenting things like, "So generous, Ruby, and what a wonderful way to celebrate both of you." I sat there staring at the screen with my hands shaking. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. They had taken my name and plastered it on an event that I didn't approve of, and worse, everyone now thought I was behind it. A week later, I got the first phone call from the venue. "Mrs. Patterson," the woman said, "we just wanted to confirm the catering choices for your event." I told her I didn't know what she was talking about. She sounded surprised and read the booking back to me. "Wyndham Ballroom, July 15th, signed by Ruby Patterson." My heart sank. They had put my name on a contract. When I asked about payments, she explained that deposits had already been made using my credit card number. That was when I checked my bank account. Sure enough, several charges had cleared. For $500 for the venue, $2,000 for flowers, $3,000 for a band. And those were just the first installments. I couldn't believe it. They hadn't just assumed I'd go along. They had gone ahead and started spending my money. My retirement savings, my cruise fund, was being drained without me even holding the pen to sign a paper. It didn't stop there. A catering company called next, asking about menu selections. They told me Vera had chosen filet mignon and salmon, plus a full open bar. That bill alone was projected at nearly $20,000. Then came the florist talking about elaborate centerpieces with imported roses. Then the entertainment coordinator confirming a 12-piece band with a separate DJ for later in the night. Each call was another punch to the gut. Every vendor treated me as though I was the one running the show. They said things like, "You've really spared no expense." Meanwhile, all I could think about was how many extra shifts I had worked to put money aside and how it was vanishing into someone else's dream party. By the time I added up all the charges and estimates, the number hit me hard, $63,000. That was the total they had lined up under my name. I felt sick. I pictured myself standing on that ship's deck, breathing in the cold Alaskan air, and then watched it vanish. In its place, I saw Vera's mother blowing out candles on a towering cake, smiling at a room full of people who would all believe I had gladly footed the bill. It wasn't just about the money. It was about being erased from my own milestone. My retirement was supposed to be my story. Instead, it had been hijacked and turned into someone else's spotlight. I wasn't being honored. I was being used. The worst part was knowing that Brian was part of it. My son, the boy I raised on my own, the one who used to sit at the kitchen table and tell me he was proud of me, had allowed this to happen. He hadn't called to ask if it was okay. He hadn't checked in with me at all. He just let Vera run the show and handed her the keys to my savings. I remember sitting at my table late that night, bills spread out in front of me, adding the numbers over and over like maybe I had made a mistake. But the math didn't change. The money that was supposed to carry me into retirement was being swallowed by a party I didn't want and hadn't agreed to. That was the moment it became real. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't poor communication. This was theft, plain and simple. And it was being done by the two people who should have been protecting me, not taking advantage of me. I knew right then that if I didn't stop it, I would lose not just my dream, but my dignity. Imagine finding out your name was used to sign away $63,000 without your permission. Wouldn't you want the world to hear your side? Help me out, like, share, and subscribe. Once I understood the size of the bill, they were stacking under my name. I knew I couldn't stay quiet. I called Brian first. I thought maybe he didn't know the full extent of what Vera had done. Maybe he was in the dark. But the second he picked up, I realized he was fully aware. I told him, "Brian, these charges are hitting my account. This party is being booked in my name, and I didn't agree to it." He didn't even sound concerned. He just sighed and said, "Mom, don't get so worked up. It's a family honor. You only retire once, and Vera's mom only turns 70 once. It makes sense to celebrate together." That line, family honor, burned in my ears. I had worked my whole life to give Brian a good start, and now he was telling me it was somehow my duty to pay for a showy event that I didn't even want. When I pushed harder, he added, "Your grandkids are going to remember this forever. Don't you want them to see their grandma as the one who gave everyone a night they'll never forget?" I sat there holding the phone, stunned. He was using my own grandchildren as leverage. He wanted me to picture their faces and feel guilty if I said no. I told him this wasn't right, that I had plans for my savings, that this was money I'd worked too hard to let slip away. That's when he said the words I'll never forget. "Mom, it's just money. You'll be fine." Just money. For me, it was years of exhaustion, nights spent in hospital corridors while my son slept at a neighbor's house. It was years of missing birthdays and Christmas mornings. To Brian, it was just numbers in an account. I hung up after that call and sat in silence. My mind drifted back to a night when Brian was about 10 years old. I had worked 2 back-to-back shifts and barely made it home. I remember sitting down on the couch, still in my scrubs, too tired to even change clothes. My feet ached, my head was pounding, and I didn't think I had another ounce of energy left in me. Brian padded over in his pajamas, holding his blanket. He sat next to me, leaned against my shoulder, and whispered, "One day, Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to throw you the biggest party ever to thank you for everything." I can still hear his little voice, soft but full of promise. That memory carried me through so many hard nights. I used to imagine the day when he'd make good on that promise, when I'd sit in a room full of friends and finally be the one celebrated. And now here he was, grown and married, using my money to fund someone else's celebration, dismissing me with, "It's just money." That was the moment the hurt went deeper than numbers. It wasn't just financial betrayal. It was the breaking of a promise that had kept me going for decades. After that, Vera started calling me directly. She used every trick in the book to try and box me in. "Ruby, people are already excited about the event. It would be embarrassing if you backed out now. Think of the family connections. We can't afford to look cheap. And always, this is as much your celebration as it is my mom's. You're the star of the night." But the truth was plain. I wasn't the star. I was the wallet. Every call, every conversation, I wrote down the details. Dates, times, amounts, what they said. I started a folder with receipts, contracts, and bank statements. If they wanted to trap me, I was going to keep a record of everything. I didn't argue much after that. I let them talk, let them push, but in the background I was collecting proof. I knew if I didn't protect myself, they'd take every penny. I also started watching the small things. Vera bragged about the band she booked, about the flowers she ordered, about the menu. She would talk about it as if she had accomplished something wonderful, and every time she did, I felt another piece of my dream slipping away. But I stayed calm. I didn't shout. I didn't storm out. I just kept my notes, one by one, like laying down stones on a path I might need to walk later. I knew then this wasn't going to be easy. They were convinced I would cave in, that guilt and pressure would force me to pay. But something inside me had shifted. The cruise fund, the broken promise, the years of sacrifice, they all sat heavy on my heart. And I decided I wasn't going to let this end with me defeated. After weeks of feeling like I was standing alone in a storm, I decided I needed help. I couldn't carry this by myself anymore. That's when I walked across the street to my neighbor Joan's house. Joan had been a bookkeeper for most of her career. She's the kind of woman who never misses a detail and still balances her checkbook down to the last penny. I sat at her kitchen table with a stack of papers and receipts spread in front of me. My hands trembled as I showed her the charges, the contracts, and the Facebook post. Joan leaned in, adjusting her glasses, and shook her head slowly. "Ruby, this isn't right. They're using your name, like a blank check." I told her I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped. She reached over, patted my hand, and said, "You need someone who knows the law. I can spot numbers, but you need someone who can shut this down." That's when she gave me Harold's number. Harold had been a friend from church for years, a man I trusted. He had practiced law before retiring, and though he mostly enjoyed gardening these days, he still kept sharp. I called him that evening and asked if he could take a look at what I had. The next morning, I walked into his home office with my folder. He spread the papers out across his desk, silent as he read line after line. Finally, he looked up at me over the rim of his glasses. "Ruby, your name is on these contracts, but there's one thing missing: your signature. Someone put you down as the responsible party without you ever signing a thing. That makes this a serious problem, but it also gives you power." I felt relief wash over me for the first time in weeks. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. They had put me down illegally. I asked Harold what I could do. He leaned back and folded his hands. "You have two choices." He held up one finger. "Option A, the clean escape. I draft a cease and desist letter to the venue and all vendors. We cancel everything. You don't owe a dime. It's simple, it's quick, and it keeps you out of any public mess." Then he held up a second finger. "Option B, the painful lesson. You let them keep thinking you're going to pay. You let them build their big night. You let Vera walk around bragging. When the bill finally comes due, we present the documents proving you never signed anything. The debt lands right back on them. It will embarrass them, but it will also teach them a lesson they'll never forget." I sat there in silence, staring at the two paths laid in front of me. Option A sounded safe, clean, dignified. I could walk away, keep my name clear, and never think about it again. But then I thought about that envelope in my dresser drawer, the Alaskan Cruise Fund. I thought about Brian's little voice promising me the biggest party one day, and how that promise had turned into him dismissing me with, "It's just money." I thought about the years of missed holidays, of sacrifices no one else even noticed. If I chose the clean escape, yes, I'd protect myself. But they'd walk away without ever facing what they did. They'd learn nothing. They'd still believe they could treat me like a doormat and expect me to smile through it. I tapped my fingers on the desk, my mind heavy. "Harold, I said quietly, "What would you do if it were your savings on the line?" He gave me a long look and answered, "Ruby, sometimes peace is worth more than justice. But sometimes justice is the only way to ever get peace." I leaned back, took a deep breath, and let the weight of my decision settle. "I know what the dignified choice is," I said. "It's to cancel, to walk away, to stay above the mess. But some lessons can't be taught gently. If I don't let them feel the sting of what they've done, they'll never stop. I can't let my son and his wife think they can keep doing this." I looked Harold straight in the eye. "I'm choosing option B." He nodded slowly, not judging me, just understanding. "Then we'll do it carefully. You keep playing along. Don't argue. Don't tip your hand. Let them think you're on board. Meanwhile, keep collecting every bit of proof. When the day comes, we'll be ready." For the first time in a long while, I felt strong. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I knew I wasn't going to be silent anymore. I was going to stand up for myself. They wanted to turn my retirement into their party? Fine. But they were going to pay the price for it. After I told Harold I was choosing option B, I felt calmer than I had in weeks. I had a plan now. I wasn't just sitting back, waiting to be drained dry. I was going to let them dig their own hole, and then I'd step aside and let them fall into it. From that point on, whenever Vera called with updates, I played along. She'd go on and on about the menu, the decorations, the music. I nodded, kept my voice steady, and said things like, "That sounds fine," or "Whatever you think is best." She thought she was winning. What she didn't know was that every word out of her mouth was going into my notebook. Dates, times costs, I wrote it all down. The more excited she became, the more determined I was to make sure she ended up facing the bill herself. At the same time, I started quietly making plans for my own celebration. Not the grand, flashy kind Vera was building, but something that felt like me. Simple, warm, surrounded by people I actually wanted there. I called the community center in town. They had a nice hall with big windows and a little garden out back. I asked about availability for the same weekend as Vera's event, and it just so happened they had an opening. I booked it on the spot. The deposit was small, and it felt good to put my money towards something I wanted instead of watching it vanish into someone else's dream. Next, I called a few friends. Joan, of course. Some of my old co-workers from the hospital. A couple of neighbors who had become like family over the years. I didn't make it public. I didn't post about it. I just invited the people who mattered to me. I told them we were keeping it simple, potluck dishes, a few decorations, maybe a playlist of old favorites. Everyone I invited was thrilled. They didn't need filet mignon and 12-piece bands to celebrate with me. They just wanted to show up and share the moment. Meanwhile, Vera kept flooding me with texts, pictures of flower arrangements, swatches of tablecloths, screenshots of a band she'd found online. "Do you like the centerpiece?" she'd ask. I'd reply, "Looks nice." "Do you prefer the salmon or the chicken?" she'd ask. I'd say, "Either one is fine." She thought I was just being easygoing. Really, I was buying time. I wasn't giving her anything she could twist into a clear agreement. Just vague answers that could mean anything. Brian stayed mostly quiet during this time, which hurt more than I wanted to admit. He let Vera run everything. If he texted me at all, it was short things like, "Thanks, Mom. This means a lot." No apology, no acknowledgement of what he was asking me to give up. As the weeks passed, I poured more energy into planning my small party. A local bakery made me a simple sheet cake with "Happy Retirement," Ruby written in blue icing. My neighbor's granddaughter offered to play guitar for a little live music. We kept it low-key, and every detail made me smile. It felt like my retirement again. Finally, the big weekend arrived. On the morning of the party, Vera sent me a stream of messages. "The florist is on their way. The venue is stunning. Don't be late. We need you here by 5:30 for photos. I read every text and set my phone aside. At that exact time, Joan was helping me hang streamers in the community center hall. By 6 o'clock, my friends began to arrive carrying casserole dishes, salads, and homemade desserts. We set everything out on long tables. Laughter filled the room. The guitar music started, and for the first time in a long time, I felt truly celebrated. People hugged me, thanked me for all the years I'd cared for them at the hospital, and wished me well in retirement. While I was cutting cake and laughing with my friends, Vera and Brian were across town at the luxury ballroom. I later heard from someone who had gone there by mistake that the place looked stunning: giant floral displays, a stage set for the band, rows of tables covered in fine linens. But there was one problem. No one had paid the final balance. The venue manager kept looking for me, asking, "Where is Mrs. Patterson? We need the rest of the payment before we can open the doors." When they couldn't reach me, all eyes turned to Brian and Vera. They had no money set aside for it. They had counted on me showing up with a checkbook in hand. Meanwhile, back at the community center, I stood in a circle of people I loved, raising a paper cup of punch while they toasted to my retirement. It wasn't flashy, but it was mine, and it was paid for with my money on my terms. That night, I went home with leftovers stacked in my fridge and a heart full of peace. Across town, my son and his wife were scrambling to explain themselves, standing face to face with a $63,000 bill they never expected to cover. I hadn't shouted, I hadn't fought. I had simply stepped aside and let the truth catch up to them. While I was dancing with my friends at the community center, the scene across town was very different. At the ballroom, guests began arriving expecting a glamorous joint celebration. They walked into a hall decorated from top to bottom, flowers on every table, a stage set up for a full band, and a buffet waiting to be uncovered. But there was tension in the air. The venue manager kept asking where I was. "We need Mrs. Patterson," he said firmly. "The balance is due before we can proceed." My son and Vera stalled, saying I was on my way. But minutes turned into hours, and I never appeared. Eventually, the manager brought out the contract. He tapped the line where my name was printed. "This is under Ruby Patterson. Without her signature or her payment, we can't move forward." He looked directly at Brian and Vera. "You two planned this event. Do you have the funds to cover it?" They didn't. They had assumed I'd show up with my checkbook. All their confidence drained as the reality sank in. $63,000 was staring them in the face, and they had no way out. Guests started to notice the whispers. People asked, "Where's Ruby? Isn't this supposed to be her party too?" Vera's family looked uncomfortable. Some even turned to Brian and demanded answers. The story they had told everyone, that I was happily footing the bill, was unraveling right there in public. I wasn't in the room, but later, more than one person told me how awkward it became. The caterers refused to serve until they had confirmation of payment. The band waited by the stage, but never played a note. The florist delivery crew stood by, not sure if they should even unpack. Finally, the venue manager announced in front of everyone, "There will be no event tonight unless payment is secured." He explained that the person whose name was on the contract had never signed a thing. That's when Harold stepped in with the paperwork he'd prepared. He showed them proof that my signature was missing, proof that charges had been made without authorization. The truth landed hard. The $63,000 bill was squarely on Brian and Vera's shoulders. The room grew quiet. People began gathering their coats. Some slipped out the door without saying a word. Others stayed, shaking their heads. The embarrassment rippled through Vera's family first, but it didn't stop there. The whole community was talking. That night, instead of music and dancing, Brian and Vera were left arguing with staff about money they didn't have. Vendors demanded explanations. Guests whispered about how reckless they had been. A celebration meant to show off turned into a lesson neither of them could escape. The next morning, Brian came to my house. He looked tired, almost desperate. He tried to explain it away, saying, "Mom, we thought you'd be there. We thought you'd cover it like you always do. People are saying things now, and we look bad." I let him talk, then quietly set down my folder of notes and receipts. I slid the paperwork across the table. "Brian, I never agreed. I never signed. Everything in here shows exactly what happened. This isn't on me. This is yours and Vera's mess to clean up." He tried to argue, saying, "You embarrassed us." But the truth was clear. I hadn't embarrassed them. They had embarrassed themselves by assuming I would pay. Word spread fast around town. Friends from church, neighbors, even some of Vera's own relatives reached out to me. Every single one of them sided with me. They said things like, "Ruby, you did the right thing," and they needed that wake-up call. For once, I wasn't the one people whispered about. I was the one they respected for finally standing up for myself. As for Brian and Vera, their reputation took a hit. People saw them for what they were: entitled, careless, and willing to use family for their own gain. The night that was supposed to elevate them ended up doing the opposite. Meanwhile, I went on with my life. I didn't gloat. I didn't argue. I simply kept walking forward. They were left to deal with the $63,000 bill. And I was free. My son told me I embarrassed him. But everyone saw the truth. He embarrassed himself. If you believe I did the right thing, prove it. Hit subscribe. Share this story. If you can't, then go to the comments and tell me why you won't. Don't just sit silent. When the dust settled, I looked back at my small community center party and smiled. It hadn't cost me much, maybe $5,000 in total. I paid for the hall, the cake, a few decorations, and the guitar player. The rest was love from friends who brought food and showed up to celebrate with me. I started calling it my freedom fee. That was the price of cutting myself loose from being taken advantage of, and I'd pay it again without hesitation. Meanwhile, the story about the ballroom spread quickly. People talked about how Brian and Vera had tried to pin $63,000 on me and ended up trapped by their own choices. Vera's family, who had once strutted around proud of the big party, suddenly kept quiet. Invitations stopped coming their way. They had embarrassed themselves in front of half the town. As for Brian, he pulled back from me. The son who used to call every Sunday now let weeks pass without a word. When he did reach out, the conversations were short and stiff. I won't lie, it hurt. But I also knew distance was better than being drained by constant demands. Sometimes peace comes when you accept that not every relationship can stay the same. I, on the other hand, finally felt free. For the first time in years, I looked at my savings account without fear. My Alaskan cruise fund was still there, untouched. I went online, found an itinerary that had been sitting on my fridge for years, and booked it. 2 weeks sailing past glaciers, watching whales breach in icy water, and standing on deck breathing in air that felt brand new. That trip gave me something more than sights. It gave me closure. Every morning when the ship horn sounded, I thought, this is mine. I had earned it, I had fought for it, and I had not let anyone take it from me. When I came home, I carried that strength with me. I started a little group at the senior center. Nothing official at first, just a circle of women talking over coffee. But soon it grew. Women began sharing their own stories about being pressured by children or relatives, about being made to feel guilty for saying no. I realized how common it was, and how many of us needed the reminder that it's okay to stand firm. 1 year later, We call ourselves the Boundary Club. We meet twice a month. We don't gossip, we support. We remind each other that after decades of working, raising families, and sacrificing, we are allowed to protect what's ours. We are allowed to say no. Looking back, I don't regret how things turned out. I paid my freedom fee and bought myself peace. Brian and Vera had to live with the weight of their choices, and I walked forward lighter. Retirement is supposed to be a time of rest. For me, it became a lesson too. A lesson that respect doesn't always come from others. It starts with respecting yourself. And once you find that, no one can take it away. When I think back on it all, I still remember sitting at Harold's desk, hearing him lay out those two options. Option A, the clean escape. Option B, the painful lesson. He told me I could walk away with dignity or I could let them fall flat in front of everyone. I chose the lesson. At the time, it felt like the only way to finally draw a line. But even now, I sometimes wonder if I was too harsh. Part of me still aches when I think about Brian, the little boy who once promised me he'd throw me the biggest party to thank me. That memory doesn't just disappear, even after all that's happened. Still, the truth is this. If I had chosen the clean escape, they would have kept doing it. Maybe not with a party, but with something else. There's always another excuse when people believe they can use you. By letting them face that bill, I taught them something they won't forget. And I gave myself something more valuable than money, peace. So now I want to ask you, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have chosen option A, the clean escape, cancel everything, protect your savings, and let them keep their pride? Or would you have chosen option B, the painful lesson, let them carry on until the truth hit, even if it meant public embarrassment? Type A for escape or B for lesson in the comments, and tell me why. I really want to know if I made the right choice. And while you're here, don't forget to like this video, share it with a friend who might need a reminder to stand their ground, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story. Your voice matters. I'll be reading every comment, and I can't wait to hear which choice you would have made.